Today on Peaking, I'm talking with David Lassman, co-founder and CEO of GigXR, a company at the forefront of transforming medical training through mixed reality and immersive learning. His journey is one that bridges worlds from venture capital, where he was helping fund innovative ideas, become a founder himself, and building technology designed to save lives and reshape how clinicians, students, and professionals learn critical skills. We dive into how mixed reality is revolutionizing medical simulation and education, the challenges of spinning up a startup out of a corporate giant, why market education is crucial when selling futuristic technology, the role of AI in taking medical training to the next level, and the leadership lessons David learned about knowing when to pivot, persist, or call it quits. He believes deeply in democratizing access to advanced training tools, ensuring that geography or resources don't determine the quality of medical education that someone can receive. If you're fascinated by the intersection of healthcare, immersive tech, and entrepreneurship, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Please enjoy. David, welcome to Peaking.
Thanks for having me, Wyatt.
Absolutely. I was looking forward to this one. I recruited for Meta's Reality Labs for almost half a decade, and it was a lot of fun pitching VR when Big Zuck was just throwing money into the space. And I'm kind of curious on your thoughts there as well. It seems that he's kind of become a little more muted on his VR bet, but your bet seems like the most practical use of mixed reality. Yeah, and so definitely very excited to learn more about it. What inspired you to start GigXR?
So a combination of things. Serendipity was one factor. So I was asked to take a look at the assets of Pearson's immersive learning division way back in 2018, I believe. Microsoft had approached Pearson, largely because they're one of the world's biggest educational publishers, a few years prior to that, saying that they were launching a product called the HoloLens, and they wanted to get some content onto those devices. And so they invested some money into Pearson. Pearson stood up an immersive learning division. They built some apps. And as part of their restructuring, they were looking to divest of that asset. And I went over, had a look at it on behalf of a mate of mine who was looking to buy it. And that deal fell through. And Pearson approached me and said, "Hey, you seem pretty impressed. Would you be interested?" And I did a market analysis. I thought about what I would do if I had those assets. And I came at it more from an idea of building a platform rather than just a bunch of content apps. And I thought there was a really great opportunity there. So I acquired those assets and started GigXR. And immediately prior to that, I was running a very small venture fund in Southern California. Having been an operator my entire professional life, I thought it'd be interesting to sit on the other side of the table. But it was great when this opportunity presented, because I thought, well, I'm not a great VC. I want to back everybody that comes through the door, but I do love building stuff. And what really inspired me about this project was I saw that we had an opportunity to build a business with good economics, which of course you need to do, but we could also build something that could do a power of good in the world. And that to me is, it's always important to me when I start a business that I think about what are we doing that's actually good. And this one, I think, of all the businesses I have, has the biggest opportunity to leave a real lasting legacy as we seek to drive positive outcomes in the way we prepare our doctors and nurses for clinical practice.
I want to dive deeper into that. I want to jump previous to your VC experience. You make a comment, you want to invest in everybody. It seems like, a lot of VC is betting on the person more than the idea to some extent. And then a lot of it is just a numbers game. You bet on 1,000 people and you're hoping for a 1,000x return and a few, 100x returns, and then you're good, you're gravy. And so is that perception incorrect, or what is your biggest takeaway from your VC experience in terms of success rates or knowing what to bet on? You feel like it is really random? You feel like there is like significant skill to it? You think people get lucky, or it's just a numbers game?
Well, let me tell you, the companies that I would immediately reject was when a founder would come into my office and say, "I'm the Uber for this, and I'm going to be $1 billion company in 24 months, right?" I say, well, hold on a minute. That's very unlikely. And what's your business model, right? Show me how you're going to make money first, right? What's the problem you're solving? What's your solution? And what are the numbers? Now, I know that when somebody comes in the door and says, "I've got an idea," or "I've built a prototype and now I'm raising money to scale this," the projections they're going to show me, a lot of it, there can be some science behind it, but things change, right? So I don't necessarily want to see a company that says, okay, by the end of year 2, we're doing 2 million in ARR, and hold them to it. I want to see what's the process of getting there. Is this going to be viable? And then something that you hinted at, Wyatt, the other thing that you look for that's almost as important as the business model is, who are the people? Who's the team? What's the management like? How passionate are they? Smart are they? Not necessarily just in terms of their experience, but understanding things like, well, from time to time, you get thrown a curveball. How are you going to react to that? How are you going to stay agile? What's your ability to pivot like? If I throw some scenarios at you, how do you respond? And I ask these questions because from my own experience, I've been through companies where I've started a company with one idea of what we're going to do, and it ended up doing something entirely different because the universe threw things at me that meant that our original idea just wasn't going to work.
So jumping back to GigXR, did any of your previous experience prepare you for founding a company in healthcare and immersive technology?
Yeah. So funnily enough, the very first business that I started was in EdTech. And it's an interesting story because I kind of became an accidental businessman. I mean, you see behind me what my real passion is. Like I was born a musician. So I was performing publicly as a kid, and I was going to music school, and my sister was a teacher, and I was watching her prepare test papers by photocopying old exams and cutting them up and using a glue stick to stick them onto a piece of paper and then photocopying that. And it would take her all evening to prepare a 30-minute test for her students the following day. And I was saying, well, isn't there something that does this electronically, right? She said, no, nothing. This was back in the UK when I was still living in London. And I said, oh, we could build a little software package to do that. And I worked with a buddy of mine who was a better coder than me. And in no time at all, we had this little front end that sat in front of a database that had a load of past papers linked to mark schemes and national curriculum and so on. And we launched that into the UK. And I thought that'd just give me a little bit of supplemental income while I worked my way through college before I become a professional musician. By the time I graduated college, we had our software pretty much in every school in the UK. So, and what I understood was that if you take a function of teaching that is challenging to deliver or onerous or time consuming, and you develop some technology that makes it easier to overcome that challenge, then they're going to bite your hand off for that, right? And I started completely by accident a SaaS business with my sister, right? It was like, here's some software. Each year we're going to update it with the latest exam material and reclassify it against the curriculum if the national curriculum, if that has changed. And we were selling subscription licenses paid annually in advance and grew this into a substantial business that we subsequently sold. And I think the same is kind of true for what we're building here at GigXR. If we can have a school bake into the way they deliver their curriculum our technology, it becomes part of the fabric of the way you teach. It becomes part of the fabric of the way you learn, and we'll just do more and more business, and it will be repeatable. That's, I'm kind of hoping this is my last business. I think it would be quite lovely that my first and final ventures were both in education.
So that first venture, there was an obvious problem that you heard from a close contact, obviously, your sister, and you solved it. It became a product for everyone because everyone had that problem. Is there that same, or was there a light bulb moment for GigXR as well? Or do you think that from your perspective, this is definitely valuable, but you need to convince everyone else it is? Yeah,
it's a great question. So when I was thinking about this business before committing to it, I had to do a kind of crash course in the way we train our doctors and nurses. And I knew they use simulation, but I didn't really know how it was applied. And essentially, there are 3 forms of simulation that medical students and nursing students exploit. One is cadaveric dissection. So good people that leave their body for medical research. These are in wet labs, they're called, typically in the bigger hospitals, bigger medical schools, because they're very expensive to stand up. And then you start your medical degree and maybe you're assigned a body, or maybe you look at parts of a body and so on. You understand what's happening under the skin. You get to see it. You get to make connections. It's a very important part of the way we learn. Similarly, we use in simulation centers things like high fidelity mannequins. These look like the things you see in a shop window selling clothes, right? But they're a little bit more sophisticated. So they've got tubes in that can bleed, or there's a heartbeat that you can hear, or, you can have other things that help you with your training in these mannequins, but mannequins can cost several $100,000. And you also have this constraint where you have to bring students into the simulation center, standing around a bed where you have the mannequin that you're using as part of your learning. So you're limited by the amount of students you can have in simulation. You're limited by costs. They're expensive to set up, so we need a technician to maintain them, but they're very important, right? The third piece of simulation that's well used is what are called standardized patient actors. These are actors that come onto campus and pretend to be diabetic or pretend to have COPD or some other pathology. Also requires students being together on campus, engaging with this person. So these very, very important modalities of simulation are great. They're always going to be used, but it's difficult to scale learning. It requires everyone being together at the same time in the same place, and it's very expensive. So the value proposition, I think the key value proposition for the GigXR platform, and indeed many other content applications that are supporting medical learning, is that you can now stand up simulation anywhere, anytime, any place. And with our system in particular, you don't even need to be in the same room, right? You can join a session using your mobile device as a conduit onto that learning experience. And that really democratizes simulation in a way that existing modalities of simulation don't. Now, the challenge that we have, and again, you hinted to this right at the beginning of the conversation, is that we're working at kind of the cutting edge of technology here. If you stop someone in the street and say, do you know what mixed reality is? They probably won't know. They probably won't have an answer. We know about VR. We associate VR most with gaming and entertainment, but we don't think about immersive technology and how it can drive training and learning. So the battle that companies like us have is we've got to educate the market. Once we do that, and once they have the technology applied, and once they bake it into the way they deliver the curriculum, then it's game over, right? Because it works. And we're now in a position, having been selling this for a number of years, where a lot of our customers have been doing research around our technology, and the data is really positive. People are learning faster, they're retaining knowledge better, and most importantly, they're feeling better prepared for clinical practice because they're able to practice this training again and again and again in a safe to fail environment. So, we're getting there, but it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah, no doubt. I actually have a little bit of that first example of training. We had a cadaver in our undergraduate program, and there was one, I think, in the whole school. And so the biology students worked on it, the kinesiology students worked on it, and it was in a number of other major programs as well. And you could do your senior project of just dissecting a forearm, and you peel back the skin, you'd label everything, and slowly but surely everything became dissected, and maybe that's not the nicest word, but I think that is the scientific term.
Yeah.
So that was, and there was a huge bottleneck there. We would have to go in, there'd be little flags on the different muscles and veins and arteries, and you had to label and know which ones were which.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, very basic anatomy, physiology class, but only, 5 students could come in at a time, and you had to go throughout the class and for your final project and final exam and know where everything was labeled. If while studying you weren't able to look at the body while studying, if I had a VR system where I could do that and then go in and see the real thing, I would have been better off. I would have probably got 100% on that test. Yeah, I was writing everything on a whiteboard, labeling veins in a 2D fashion, which is way different than seeing it on a real body.
Yeah. And actually what's great is how immersive technology can support that particular methodology of learning, the cadavers. Let's say, for instance, you're learning about the cardiovascular system and you want to understand how the heart functions, or what does the heart look like when it's in a healthy state? What does it look like when it's in a disease state? Well, you cut open a cadaver, you're going to see a dead heart. It won't be beating. It's going to not look anything like a functioning heart.
Yeah.
So we have on our platform a third-party application built by a fantastic crew in Germany called Animares. And you can do a deep dive into the heart. You can have the heart in front of a bunch of students. You can see the heart in a healthy state. You can see it pumping. You could see how blood clots are formed, what the impact of a blood clot is on the cardiovascular system. You can see a heart in a disease state, myocardial infarction, for example. To be able to visualize in a 3D model in incredible fidelity how an organ like the heart functions, and then come to a cadaver and see, how all the arteries connect and so on. It really just fills out that learning experience and will improve your level of understanding, I think, in orders of magnitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to the company side, you spun out from Pearson. You said a lot of the founders I talked to are starting from zero. They have an idea and maybe they get some funding and they start building. What were the biggest challenges or benefits of spinning out a startup from a large corporate parent?
So of the assets that we brought into GigXR, a lot of research that the Pearson team had done, which was incredibly helpful. They also came with, I think, about 10 customers that were using one of the medical applications they'd built. So I've got 5 content apps. 3 of them were not consistent with the vision that I have for GigXR, and 2 of them were. One was an anatomy application and one was a standardized patient application. And those 2 applications are really at the foundation of everything that we do. They're our biggest selling apps. So the know-how that we acquired, the research, the data, a handful of customers that we could build on, gave us a good head start. But they approached it as a publisher would do, of I'm building a piece of content. So you put on your headset, you open an application, you close your headset, you open another application. And where we felt the value really lay was in presenting these applications as part of a bigger ecosystem, a platform, a one-stop shop really for all of your medical learning. And very early on, we started using terms like, as we thought about what business models we could replicate, we were looking at things like Netflix, right? What Netflix did so successfully is you pay your subscription, your monthly due, and then you have access to all of this content to entertain you, some of which has the big red N because it's Netflix's own content, and some of it which is content they've acquired. And everybody wins in that scenario, right? I've got this, if I'm an independent movie maker, I now have a distribution platform for my movie. And as a consumer, I get access to deep, deep content. So we took the view that for us to be able to build a platform that supported a broad set of applications, it would have been hubris to think we could build that all ourselves. What are we fundamentally? Technologists? We're not necessarily content people, right? We're building the tools to develop the content for sure. So we decided very early on that the platform play affords us the ability to be able to open it up and take third-party applications that anybody could build, right? And then put it in the hands of our global marketing and distribution network, and we could sell this app on your behalf, just like Netflix does with third-party content. It took quite a long time to develop the building blocks of that platform once I brought the assets over from Pearson. So we kind of went into a bit of a pause, developed the platform, started building further applications for it over time. Some of them built by us in partnership with subject matter experts from leading institutions across the world, and others built by third parties.
So you put a pause on like sales, trying to get new customers, and just wanted a slightly more robust library of content before you try to acquire new customers.
Yeah, exactly right. So how do you make something like this sticky? Well, one is going back to like my early EdTech days, give them as many tools as you can that help them deal with the most complex challenges they face. So one of the challenges that the medical and nursing schools face is there's just so much content, so much that students have to learn, right? So anything we can do to help with the delivery of that learning is good. So we need breadth, hence our decision to open up the platform to third parties because we felt we could accelerate that growth. But also tool sets and features that make it not just enjoyable to use, but useful. For example, if I'm teaching, let's go back to the cardiovascular system, right? So what I might do is I might start off with some content in one of our anatomy applications showing the cardiovascular system. I might go into the Insight Heart application to get some visual cues as to what the heart looks like. I might then open up one of our standardized patient applications to look at what does a patient look like who's going into cardiac arrest, right? Or suffering from COPD, whatever it might be. So I'm using content from all of these applications to deliver a certain part of my curriculum. We've had educators say it's astonishing how quickly it now is to join these dots. So looking at something like what you do to the pathophysiology of what's happening when somebody presents with a certain condition. Often that takes months of learning, and we're able to visualize that now in no time at all. But then also being able to do things like, well, I want to be able to reteach this next semester. So I don't want to have to start again by pulling all the content out of these apps and so on. So we build things like session plans, right? So I want to build a session plan to deliver this part of the teaching. I'm going to use content from these applications. I'm going to save it just like I might a sort of 3D PowerPoint, right? And I hit a button and boom, everyone's in the content, right? So adding those types of features at the platform level that can propagate out to all of the applications we support, that was a huge departure from what we inherited from Pearson. And that needed a complete rethink in the way that we were going to be delivering this type of learning experience.
For someone new to mixed reality, what are the unique challenges or differences with building something with mixed reality as opposed to maybe just a traditional SaaS platform?
Well, I can answer that in a number of ways. Let's start with what's the difference between mixed reality and virtual reality, right? Because I'm guessing that still some folks don't necessarily know the difference, right? The mixed reality is where you blend the physical and the digital world. In my opinion, the best kind of mixed reality device would be something that has a clear visor, or in fact your mobile phone. So think about holding up your mobile phone, pointing at the chair next to you that's empty, and suddenly you can see a patient in that chair because you've set it there, right?
Yep.
That blend of the physical and digital worlds is really useful when we think about education, in particular when we think about medical education, because the delivery of healthcare is a connected experience. You go into a hospital, you might be in a bed in an ER, and there are a couple of nurses. One will be taking your vitals, another one might be taking your temperature. Doctor will come in, prescribe medication. The nurses then have to go and administer that medication and so on. So to be able to mimic what happens in a clinical environment, I think is really important and really valuable. And then also just not fearing tripping over a wire or a chair or bumping into your neighbor, or being able to see a fellow student across the other side of a bed performing their tasks. It's really, really powerful, really powerful. And as I say, we think about this as a very complementary modality of learning to what exists already. And it's complementary, one, because it extends it, as I mentioned before, but also it mirrors precisely what they're all accustomed to doing in the way that they learn.
In terms of building the actual platform or product, how difficult is that technically compared to building a web application?
So I can only
just need different types of engineers.
Yeah, I can talk to some of that. The guys that build this stuff are on a completely different pay grade to me in terms of their ability.
Sure.
And they're fantastic. We have a great team. And it's a combination of Unity engineers, back-end engineers, and content creators, so 3D artists. We have two outstanding artists. They do incredible work. And then, a team of product managers who all have a technical bent. These things are not easy to build. The apps aren't easy to build, and the platform's not easy to build. And we think about this in a very organic way. We will build one app at a time. Before we commit a line of code, we do our best to ensure that what we're going to be building will have applicability and value. So we have in our team, when we call her our innovation specialist, she's actually a brilliant doctor from the UK. She wrote a PhD. Her PhD study was in the effectiveness of immersive learning in medical simulation training.
Sounds spot on.
Yes, spot on, right? And so she basically says, yeah, don't build that. No one's going to come, right? Or, yeah, that's a really good thing to build because there's a global demand for that. So it takes a village to build that kind of application. And also at the platform level, we'll introduce one feature at a time. And that, as I said, resides at the platform level and feeds out to all the applications. So we've recently introduced, for example, a conversational AI layer. So you can actually engage with a simulation patient, right? And they talk back to you relatively intelligently, and they sound like a real patient. So that technology layer will be available to anybody that wants to exploit it as they think about building an application.
And that will just get better, obviously, with time. In terms of the hardware, are you doing all of this through Meta's VR devices? You mentioned HoloLens in the beginning. Does this work with Apple's device?
Yeah.
Or how many devices can you work with this platform?
So we were originally on the HoloLens because it was, at the time, the only viable mixed reality headset, true mixed reality headset. It had its limitations and it had its quirks, and some people loved it and some people just couldn't get over the challenges of using it. But it was a great device, and we were very surprised when Microsoft pulled it. I still think that it's an unbeatable device if you want to use mixed reality. So when they pulled from the market very abruptly, we had to hurry to get our platform onto another system. And we went for the Quest. We went for the Quest because it's pass-through capabilities. So the camera's on the outside of the device that projects the real world into your field of view. It's pretty good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's, some people say it's not as good as the Vision Pro, but you know what? We work on the Quest 3S, which is $299, as opposed to the Vision Pro, which is $3,500. So it's really good value for money. We're seeing a lot of higher education institutions buying these devices in quite large numbers. So it made complete commercial sense for us to port over to the Quest. The Quest is built on OpenXR, and OpenXR drives many other manufacturers as well. So we're fairly confident that the lift to put the platform onto other devices, like the Pico's device or HTC or whatever, won't be that significant. We want to offer as much optionality to our customers as possible. So when we've completed our work with the Quest, almost certainly move on to another device. And of course, our platform works on iOS and Android as well. So if you don't have a headset, you can join a session on a mobile device or a tablet.
You're just holding it in front of your face, basically.
You walk around the room as though the whole of the content is been placed in the room, and you're walking around and viewing it from every possible angle.
Is that different than augmented reality? Is mixed reality and augmented reality theoretically the same thing?
Well, I like to think of augmented reality as being a great example like Pokemon Go, right? So you hold up your phone and there'll be some information or something fun that's put into the situation you're in, right? Yeah. A good example of augmented reality might be I'm looking at an apartment complex and I might hold my phone up and it will tell me that apartment complex has these number of apartments for rent and this is the rent amount, right? So it's delivering information that augments the experience you're having at any given point in time. I think mixed reality is more about this blend, right? This blend of putting holograms logically into the space that you're in. And if you think about most augmented reality experiences, that would just be something that will appear on a phone, right? Here we might be placing a patient on a bed in your sim center, or placing a patient on a chair in the classroom, or procedural tools on a desk or table. Something like that.
What's a specific use case in healthcare where you've seen GigXR make the most measurable impact so far?
That's a really good question. I think that the standardized patient application called HoloPatient has proven to be incredibly impactful and effective for a number of reasons. One is I can bring an actor onto campus, but then I have to then train my actor to present like a patient with a certain ailment, exhibit certain symptoms, say certain things when asked questions. I have to organize that, I have to administrate it, I have to pay him, her, it's a headache. So with our application, you can place the patient in the room that you're in and do all the same learning using your observational clinical skills to make a determination of what's happening with this patient and then assign the right therapy. And you can do that again and again and again. It's totally reliable, totally scalable. And our patients are filmed using volumetric video, which is, same kind of technology they use in the big blockbuster Hollywood movies, where I can film a patient using several, like 150 cameras maybe, and present that patient to a student in incredible fidelity, getting a level of realism that you simply can't achieve in any other form of simulation training. And those things combined have made that extremely popular. And the data that we're getting from the empirical data now, from people who are doing research around it, is showing that this is, at worst, as effective as traditional modalities of simulation, but in many instances, a lot more effective.
Sounds like it would need an immense amount of computing power. All the hardware is good enough. There's no issues.
Yeah,
there.
No, it actually requires a little less than you'd think. The most compute, I think, one of my engineers might correct me here, but is on the Quest it takes a load of compute power to film the physical world and project that into your field of view. Excuse me. It takes a lot less to actually broadcast content that's stored locally on the device.
I mean, one of the most data intensive application is gaming. So it's a gaming device. So it should be powerful enough for anything you can throw at it. How do you balance realism with practicality in medical simulations? Is that an issue? Is that something you have to think about? Like, how lifelike does the simulation need to be to achieve the learning goals?
Sure. Well, that really depends on what you're teaching. In the case of the standardized patient application, where a student relies very heavily on being able to spot things like visual cues, that fidelity is important. So if you want to see what lesions look like that might be consistent with an allergic reaction, you want those to be pretty realistic. If you're learning how to do an IV cannulation, right? And what you're trying to learn here is, how do I piece this equipment together? Realism isn't so important. Where it really helps, though, are things like, and we do this really well in one of our scenario-based applications, where Cambridge University approached us and said, we'd love to work with you on building an application around the respiratory system, because it's very hard to have realistic simulation for that. Like, I can't get a mannequin to look like it's struggling to breathe. And similarly, if I bring an actor or one of us role models, somebody who is, having a severe asthma attack or, something worse, right? It's, how do you do that? I don't know if you've ever seen someone with a severe asthma attack, but their neck muscles, these things called the accessory muscles, expand massively and then contract and expand and contract. And you see that, you go, oh, wow, that person's really struggling to breathe, probably asthma, but let's do a deeper dive. So we have in our application the ability to have those accessory muscles expand and contract, or to see a patient sweat, which again, it's really important. That's a really important visual cue. Or the position in which you sit, right? So if you're struggling to breathe, you instinctively get yourself into what's called the tripod position, which is where you lean forward, you push your arms into the bed and, you struggle. So we can create that fidelity in the work that we're doing. And in those moments, it's important to be accurate and as realistic as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned AI being integrated into the product for conversational, which so crucial for patient care. What role do you see AI or large language models playing in mixed reality's future beyond that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that AI is going to be used at the engineering level. I know that our team are looking at AI, what tools they can integrate into the way they build stuff, for two reasons. One is, if we can drive efficiencies, that's a good thing. But also if we can drive improvements, right? That might be great too. I think the LLMs, AI in general, will start to play a more pivotal role in things like assessment. So again, thinking about how do we drive efficiencies for the teachers? Well, if a teacher has to watch every student go through a simulation process and assess them, that's time away from either teaching or it's time away from being a doctor. So I think platforms like ours, we're not there yet, but we will be. It's very much on our roadmap. We'll be relying very heavily on how AI can drive that type of innovation and drive those types of efficiencies.
That makes complete sense. Another person I've talked with, running a company called Breakout Learning, they're an ed tech company that focuses on accumulating a conversation from 5 to 8 students together about a certain topic, recording the call, and then sending the teacher everyone's understanding of the topic based on what they've said in that conversation. And it sounds like it could be a very similar concept where someone's working on a certain body, in mixed reality, and the AI can catch mistakes they make and then just send reports to the professor. And that's where the professor would focus on for that specific student. Is that kind of what you're envisioning?
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are going to be some types of, some areas of learning that lend themselves more readily to that. If you're assessing a student on where they put a central line in on a mannequin, that might still require some visual oversight from somebody who knows what they're doing. But there are lots of ways that we see AI being absolutely key in driving those sorts of efficiencies and providing things like proctoring wherever possible.
Yeah, that makes sense. Seems like rapid innovation in the mixed reality space. Also, potentially some hype. How do you cut through the noise to show real value to potential customers?
So use cases are really good for that. We've got a whole bunch of great case studies that our customers have done that talk about the way they've integrated the platform into their learning. That's helpful. But also, I think we're at a bit of a tipping point here. We've historically looked at virtual reality. I'm deliberately saying virtual reality because that's what everyone's been talking about for 20 years. We hear people say things like, I'm not convinced, or it's a fad, or it's okay for gaming, but it doesn't have any kind of enterprise application. And I even think that a lot of the venture folks are more cautious when it comes to VR businesses. But I think that's changing. You know, actually, you mentioned that Zuckerberg's been a bit more quiet on stuff, but I think that Meta are doubling down on mixed reality. The new devices that they're hinting at coming out later, I think next year, are going to take mixed reality to a new level. Seeing the incredible work that companies like Pico are doing, Xreal, there are more and more hardware companies coming into this space because the market is saying this is a good application. There are ways that we can exploit mixed reality to really drive outcomes in our business, whether it's manufacturing, engineering, education, training of any color. I've seen some fantastic applications that help with things like HR. I dare say there's going to be, if there isn't already, applications on how to improve your dating skills, right? It's going to become part of the way we function in life. And you're absolutely right that technology is moving at an extraordinary pace. So headsets are going to get lighter and more powerful. And then we're going to have them in just a pair of spectacles that you pull out of your top pocket, and suddenly your experience on the world is augmented. Yeah. I think this is an exciting time to be in this industry. I think that there will be a shift in the way venture sees mixed reality, and that will come on the shoulders of, you know, companies like ours who are doing good work out there, proving that we can stand up businesses that have good economics, but importantly, driving real world value.
Are there enough Unity developers out there for a ton of XR companies?
I'm sure there are. You know,
that should be a question you have for me, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm sure they are, but also the tools for building this stuff are just getting so much more sophisticated. You know, the kind of the bar probably is dropping a little bit in terms of how easy it is to develop your own Unity applications. You know, we're getting to a point where it's almost like no code, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. Is your roadmap, you want to stay within healthcare, you think, or do you see, you know, years down the line, you move into manufacturing and electrician, and like there's so many different XR applications around training because there's so many jobs. Honestly, with the AI boom, all the hands-on jobs might be the most safe. And so you need a way to train everybody. And maybe this would be the best way to do it. Maybe not. But
yeah.
Do you have any roadmap there for outside other industries or any other companies that you're watching in those other industries?
Well, so it would be incredibly tempting to go into other verticals just because we see the application, but we are being highly focused on the healthcare market. Two reasons. One is we think it's a really good space for mixed reality to be playing in. And two, we just want to become like the gold standard for mixed reality training with broad content on our platform. And if we allow ourselves to be diverted by building things that are not aligned to that vision, I think it's going to be problematic. Now, we're building the foundations for delivering this type of training in any vertical. So I'm not going to say we're never going to go into other verticals, but I don't think we're going to go into other verticals in the near term. There are lots of ways we could get creative about this, you know, starting up joint ventures, licensing technology, or maybe at some point we'll look at an industry and say, no, it makes total sense to be there, but that's not going to be for some time yet.
Yeah, I think the barrier to entry for training in healthcare is quite large because you talked about those examples, an actor, a cadaver, whatever these like those costs are incredibly high. Whereas my example of like some type of manufacturing training, you can build some type of plumbing arrangement fairly cheaply. You don't need a human body donated to science to be able to work on some type of manufacturing or trades school. Your vertical makes the most sense of anything I can think of off the top of my head. As a founder, you've raised a couple companies. You've talked to a lot of founders in VC. What's the biggest leadership lesson you've learned as a founder?
So I think the hardest thing for founders to do is to recognize when the game is up. Somebody once said to me, there's incredible relief after you've been pulling a big boulder up a hill for so long to cut the rope and let it slide away. And I had one company that was the best company that didn't make it, in my opinion, that I was just determined to make work. And I stuck at it much longer than I should have done. And had I heeded those words of advice, I think I would have been much better off as a human, right? It was a real struggle trying to keep that business going. And it was a relief when I finally said, no, okay, we got to call quits on this one. And that might sound like an odd piece of advice to give somebody who's starting a business, but that stay on your toes, be agile. Sometimes you have the best business plan and the best intentions of making something work, and then something will happen in the universe that suddenly makes your idea irrelevant. Again, I had a similar experience with a company that we had that I started before Google came on the scene, and we were doing contextual delivery of content in a client-side piece of software. And then Google came in and just blew us out the market. And despite the fact that they were in breach of a whole bunch of patents that we had, I thought the smarter thing to do was say, well, what do we have here at like the platform level? What have we built here that we could apply in a different way? And we flipped our business model overnight, and we built a successful business that we sold to a big competitor.
That is funny advice, but it's advice I've heard from multiple people, is knowing when to call it. And then there's the opposite of like, just stick it out one more year. Just like you're almost there. You've been digging for so long and you're just 1 foot above the gold mine, and you just, if you quit now, you lose it all. So obviously it's a delicate balance, and obviously most businesses don't succeed. So I think your advice probably applies more than the alternative, but it goes both ways, of course. And I think experience and knowledge will make a big difference in knowing which is the right track. I wanted to jump back to a question around GigXR. Your main customers, are you selling mostly to universities, hospitals, or enterprises? Do you have plans to sell to more of one? And how do their needs differ?
Yeah. So the majority of our clients are medical schools and nursing schools, hospitals as well. Any institution that has a cohort of students that are in the healthcare space. There'll be some applications on our platform that will have less relevance to a nursing school because they're very much focused on something that a doctor needs to do, and kind of vice versa, actually. So the HoloPatient, the standards patient app, that's used in way more nursing schools than med schools, because this is something that's just so important for nurses to master. And they have to rely on things like ward rounds to see patients that exhibit some of the symptoms of the patients that we have in our application. And that's, when you're teaching nurses, you can't leave things to chance. Hopefully in the next 6 weeks, someone's going to turn up with COPD, for example.
Yeah. Running the company, have you grown at the pace you've hoped for?
So the pandemic was a huge headwind. We had a system that we just brought into the world that relied at the time on students being together in the same place. And suddenly students weren't going to school anymore. So that was a shock to the system. But then we engineered this mobile layer that allowed students to join a simulation session no matter where they were in the world. And so, I mean, that all kind of points to your earlier question about advice that I might give to a founder. It's like, I kind of was so close to going to a major depression at the start of the pandemic. It's like, oh my goodness, we've literally lost our business overnight. We could have panicked and shut down or laid off all the team. And it was like, what can we do to get ourselves out of this mess, right? So we engineered this layer very quickly. And then what was a significant headwind, we turned into a tailwind. But we definitely saw, flatline in sales. And then we had the moment last year when Microsoft came out, pulled the HoloLens out of the market. It's the same thing. It's like, oh, crap, we've got nothing to sell. So you have to be quick and responsive and agile, which thankfully we were able to be.
And you turned that virtual training into somewhat of an additional product offering now, right? Like you're just continuing to use that.
I mean, we probably, with hindsight, should have engineered the platform for the Quest sooner than we did. But that's another thing that you have to deal with as a founder, right? You've got a finite amount of resources. We're still a startup, so I only have so many engineers at my disposal. So how do you prioritize things? But being on the Quest now has actually created tremendous opportunity for us, because we're able to say to customers, we've taken away that friction point of having to spend $3,500 on the headset to deliver this learning. We had a school yesterday buy a whole load of 3Ss because they want to deploy our platform. And it was like, whoa, we could buy 10 of those for like $3,500. It's just great.
Yeah, it's such a big difference. The podcast is called Peaking. There's 3 reasons for it. I think I've explained already, but one of them is just reaching a pinnacle, just having the best experience, having the best time. What has been your peak so far building GigXR? And what are you looking forward to most?
So the easy things to point to, like in 2020, we were Time Magazine's best invention in healthcare. Great. You know, we got this nice little shiny award and we can pin it on the wall and say, look, aren't we clever? But actually, I think, you know, I've been at this almost 7 years now. And I look at the team that we have here. I think that's my peak.
Yeah.
We've just got a really great crew of people. And we are very connected. I think we're connected because we all believe in the mission here. And we all love the fact that we're putting a lot of time and effort. And in many instances, you know, we're being paid way under market, right? Because we're in a startup. But we're doing it because we really care. And we love the idea that the contribution that we're making individually and collectively is making a material difference out there. You're talking to me, man, because I'm the founder of the company. I represent everybody that works alongside me. We are a family. We're very close, even though we're all remote, right? It's a beautiful thing.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, the world gets better if you succeed. Not every company can say that. I think that is a significant purpose in building a company, no matter what level of the company you're at. How about outside of work? Where do you find your peaks?
Oh my gosh, I don't get enough of that, really. That's again an occupational hazard of being a founder, right? You wake up thinking about the business very often in the middle of the night, and you go to sleep thinking about the business, and it comes with the territory. My escape is cooking. I'm lucky.
Awesome.
Live in a good house with a well-stocked and well-appointed kitchen. And I got a big outdoor space with a grill. So, you know, and living in LA, man, it's like al fresco, you know, most days of the year. So it's like...
that's unbelievable. Yeah, the produce in Southern California, it doesn't get much better.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Modern supply chain, you can basically get everything anywhere nowadays anyway. But yeah, that's awesome. Well, the world wants you to succeed. I certainly do. Very interested in following your story. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. Where can people find you if they're interested in learning more or potentially working for you or looking at the product?
Look me up on LinkedIn. You can reach us through the website as well. But LinkedIn is a great place to start.
Awesome.
And I'm the only David King Lassman on LinkedIn.
All right. That's helpful. I'm not the only Wyatt Carr, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.